So I thought we'd take a look real quick at the word Orion in Hebrew and break it down by its letters and their meaning. What's really interesting about this is that when you break them down into their letters, they mean something completely different than when it refers to the Fool, for example. It says that Orion constellation here, the word origin is probably from Kasal, and Kasal is this word which means to be or become stupid. Well, this is not exactly what it means. What you're going to notice right off the bat is that these two words look literally the same except for the yod that you see right here. And so when we start breaking these things down, we'll see that what the true meaning is. And I find it really interesting. I discovered some very interesting things I want to show you. First of all, it says that these two are the same. And if we take a look at the Fool and we take a look at the Bota deck for Fool, you could see, if you take a look at the Fool card, it's the number 0 card, but it's got the symbol Aleph, which means 1, and number 1 would be the first Sephra on the tree of life, which would be Kether. Okay, so if you take a look at the placement of Orion and Sirius, I mean, this is the actual placement of the stars and the distance from each other, and they just so happen to be almost completely imitating each other. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But let's take a look at the letters real quick. What do these mean? And I'm going to give you some interesting links and references as we go. The first letter that I've got highlighted here is Kaf. Okay, and Kaf, it appears somewhat like a crown on the head of a prostrating king, and Kether means the crown. And if you notice, Kether, the first letter of Kether is Kaf because it means crown. Okay? And so it says here in mysticism, it's the latent power of the spiritual potential to be made actual in the physical. This is exactly what we've talked about before with this idea of Kether coming into manifestation by moving down to Chokmah, which is wisdom, and then moving across, with wisdom basically being the force going through and then going through a gate into the sea and basically causing physical manifestation. This is exactly what it's talking about here. So something interesting. This is from Pyramid Texts 442. And it says the king, okay, the crown on the head of a prostrating king, becomes a star. Okay. And if we take a look at the symbol for Orion, this is the symbol for it, and this is the star right here that they're talking about, and that's where the Orion Nebula is. It is the dim star below the 3 belt stars. Now, how do I know it's a star? Well, if you take a look at the Yoga Vasistha Hindu texts called the germinating seed, I've got these two areas highlighted here for you. Well, it says the mind, which is the subject of the thoughts, contemplates on the nature of elementary matter and thus becomes of itself the quintessence of 5 elements. The mind is opposed to matter, but being the principle of volition produces matter at its will. The quintessential mind next becomes a spark. Okay, now spark, which is divine spark, okay, of itself. Because remember, it's moving down itself and remains a dim star, right here, a nebula, in the midst of the vacuity of the yet unborn universe. So what this tells us, the Yoga Vasistha is confirming that it is a spark, the divine spark, which is Kether, and it's the nebula. And right here, the king becomes a star. It says, lo, he has come as Orion. He's come as the star of Orion. And the Yoga Vasistha has told us that that dim star is the spark. That spark is Kether of itself once it manifests and it becomes a nebula, which is what it's saying here. Lo is Osiris has come as Orion. This is Pyramid Text Utterance 442. And it says, you shall rise with Orion in the eastern sky. You shall set with Orion, because it travels with the 7 stars of Orion. It moves up into the sky with it. It moves down to the sky with it. And so once again, right here, we have, it also represents palm. And there's some old pictures showing the palm coming out of the clouds in the sky. This is the manifestation coming out of the sky and then basically pouring out on the lower Sephiroth. Once again, it says it's the shape of a crown on a king's head. Now, Orion, or Kether, as we learned the last time in the Kabbalah text called the Mystical Kabbalah, that the microcosm, correspondence to the microcosm of Kether to the Egyptians was the Sa. Well, Sa is, if you look at the Dictionary of Middle Egyptian, is the Orion constellation, and there is the hieroglyphs that represent it. So you can look that up yourself. Let's see if I've got anything on this more. Oh yeah, so right down here it says, the same fiery spark, figuratively called Brahmanda or mundane egg, became as a snowball amidst the water and conceived the great Brahma within its hollow womb. The spirit of God, dove-like, sat brooding over the hollow deep. And Milton said that. And if you take a look at this picture of the high altar, what is that hovering over the waters here? This is the spirit, and this is the nebula that we're talking about. This is showing creation. This is kind of another depiction of the Tetragrammaton. This is let there be light, and it's happening in this nebula right here that is being presented. Okay, so that's the first letter. Okay, the first letter means crown. All right, and this is the word of crown in Hebrew. Okay. Now here's the second part that you'll find really interesting. The second letter, it says, is Samek, and this, they say, may be derived from the Egyptian hieroglyph of the Jed, and the Jed, if you look that up, you'll see that it's an ancient Egyptian symbol meaning the stability. It's the symbolic backbone of the god Osiris, which came forth as Orion. Okay? And if you notice that these Hebrew letters are a lot of times borrowing from the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt. And I've seen this in many instances. And you can see how it's making a lot of sense what it's saying here. So now let's go to the next letter. The next letter is the Yod. And this Yod, the Yod is very interesting here. What I've got highlighted here is that it says, in fact, the word Yod itself depicts something of the geometry of creation. It begins with the Yod as a dot, and then moves downward from the divine toward the created in order to form a Vav, the hook of creation. And what we're really talking about, the way it looks, is a line. So we have a dot, and then we have a line, and then we have, because this is Yod, Y-O-D, basically. And this right here is a picture of what? It's Daleth, and Daleth means door, and that means gate. So if you remember what we talked about, here's your dot, this is Kether, moving down, becoming the line, which is Hokmah, the force, and then going through the gate. So it's showing the exact same thing when we take a look at this. So it's showing the geometry of creation with the letter Yod broken down into its subcomponents. And then the last one here was really interesting because it's saying that the last letter comes from, it means to learn or teach. And down here, and I believe that, who was it? The guy that did the Temple and Man. Oh, well, can't remember his name, but anyways, so this, if we take a look at Lamed, it can be seen as an acronym as meaning a heart that understands knowledge. Okay, so I remembered this phrase here, a heart that understands knowledge. So let me kind of read that to what that says in the Zohar here. And it says, he explains in his words, thus the smoke arises from Bina, which is in the heart. Now Bina is right here on the left side there. Wisdom's on the right side, which is the heart, considered to be an understanding heart. An understanding heart, it rises to Chokmah, which is like the brain. So the brain is on the right side, which is the wisdom side. What is the smoke? It's the central column, Zer and Pen, that rises and unites Chokmah and Bina and becomes dot to them. This is the secret of a heart that understands knowledge. So we're really talking about dot here. And that is right where this is. And if you notice, the guy in the background, his head, that's right on his forehead, and that's also where you're going to see Jesus' head on the cross, okay? Because what he's really doing on that cross, it's a representation of the tree of life with his head at dot, okay, at knowledge, uniting understanding and wisdom, a heart that understands knowledge. And so we have that represented here. The goal of learning and teaching, Lamed, is heart knowledge. Moreover, since it is the only letter allowed to ascend above the other letters in sacred writings, Lamed represents the prominence of learning and understanding to the Jewish heart. That doesn't quite sound like a fool, like a dumb person, does it? It sounds like it's exactly what Osiris is. Even talks about the Jed, and here are all of the references to all of this stuff, to even Hindu texts, showing that it's the nebula that first comes into existence. And even Kether itself mentions that it's the first swirlings, the divine spark of itself, a nebula. And it's a crown and a king, and it's Osiris, all this stuff. All that from these 4 letters by breaking them down like that. And it does not mean a dumb person. You can see how this has been coded. So I hope you thought that was interesting. You guys take care, and I'll talk to you soon.